The President of the Republic, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, spoke to workers. Let's take some excerpts from his speech.
Mr. Vice President, Chief of Staff, Minister for Employment and Social and Labor Relations, Ministers of State, Members of Parliament, Secretary General, and other officials of the Trades Union Congress, representatives of other workers' organizations, respected religious leaders, members of the diplomatic corps, Nime, Name, Wulome, workers of Ghana, brothers and sisters, fellow Ghanaians, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor for me to be amongst you today as we celebrate May Day, the day set aside specially for workers. It is my first as President of the Republic, and I share your joy in the day. I have discovered that I am now, unfortunately, the chief employer, but I also remain quite properly our nation's chief laborer. I say unfortunate because it is my hope and expectation that the great majority of the jobs that are going to be created in my time will be created by the private sector. A vibrant private sector can create so many more jobs than the public sector. There are many things we take for granted, but when we recall the Haymarket affair that gave the name May Day, we must pay homage to those who fought the heroic battles that made today's ordinary things possible. Some people lost their lives so we could have the 8-hour working day. And it took years of struggle before we could have Saturday as part of the weekend. The role of organized labor in our nation's struggle for freedom is written in letters of gold. Indeed, Kwame Nkrumah's historic call for positive action in 1950 would not have succeeded without the active support of the trades union movement. Kobe Binding, Vidal Quest, Anthony Wood, and the other workers' leaders have secure places in the pantheon of great nationalists through whose work and sacrifice we have inherited the free, independent Ghana of today. On this day, May Day, in the period when we are commemorating the 60th year of our independence, it is fitting and proper that we pay tribute to their memory and the memory and work of their successors, such as Jophil Maya, John Tetegan, B.A. Bentum, A.M. Isifu, A.K. Yankee, Christian Apiaje, Kwasi Adu Amankwa, and Kofi Asamoah. Mr. Secretary General, Mr. Chairman, it is always uppermost in my mind that the overwhelming vote of confidence given to me and my party by the Ghanaian people on 7th December last year had everything to do with the belief that we would revive and grow the economy and generate jobs in our country. We have a huge workforce, but the majority of people are underemployed, inappropriately employed, or unemployed. We all know that the number of people in what can be described as formal work is a tiny part of the workforce of our country. The figures I have seen suggest that the size of the workforce in our country is about 13 million people, and there are less than 2 million in formal work. Unfortunately, much of our preoccupation seems to be with this small group in the formal sector. It is time for us all to bring more of our people into the formal sector. It would indeed be in everybody's interest to do so. The first order of business, therefore, must be to get our economy out of the doldrums and create the atmosphere for our entrepreneurs to bring on the jobs. There are things the government must do, and there are things the citizens as a whole, and organized labor in particular, must do. We in government have set about our task with zeal. Our first budget, the Asempa budget, has set out clearly the roadmap to bringing prosperity to Ghana. We have taken important steps to create an enabling environment for the private sector to flourish and create jobs. We have reduced taxes, including taxes on kayaye. Inflation is on the decline. Interest rates are on the decline. And relative stability of the exchange rate has been restored. The budget also reduced the fiscal deficit from some 9% in 2016 to a projected 6.5% in 2017, bringing Ghana back to the path of fiscal discipline. Macroeconomic stability, which is key to economic growth and job creation, is therefore being restored. We must make it easier for people who want to set up businesses to do so and remove the impediments in the way of entrepreneurs.
So President Akufo-Addo there, he actually apologized for the cold and cough there. But he spoke about some other issues. He spoke on topical ones like galamsey, he spoke on human trafficking, and he spoke about the ECG concession. He mentioned that they're trying to renegotiate the terms of that particular agreement, the Power Compact 2, with the MCC, and the hope to reduce it from 25 to 20 years and make it a little more convenient for workers so we don't have unnecessary job losses. But I've got MP for Keta, Richard Koshiga, in the studio with me. He's also the Deputy Minority Spokesperson and Deputy Ranking Member on Employment, Labor Relations and State Enterprises here with me because the minority released a statement earlier today and is here to, answer some questions about this statement and give us some more understanding. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And congratulations to you. Happy Workers' Day.
Same to you.
All right, let's go straight into this statement you released earlier today. I'm just going to read some extracts, and the fourth paragraph, they start by congratulating all workers and speaking about how the Workers' Front in recent past has demonstrated its capabilities in freedom and dignity, proving their wealth in a well-motivated atmosphere and achieving results without intimidation or fear from any quarters. And Quickly down to the 4th paragraph, they say it is sad to note that elements associated with this current administration attacked public institutions, forced out workers of these institutions, and in many instances physically assaulted the lawful employees, all in the name of political takeovers. Now, they add, this situation has created fear and panic among the Ghanaian workforce and to a large extent limiting the free, friendly worker environment that existed before the change of government on the 7th of January 2017. Let's start off from this point, Mr. Kwashiga. Some may argue this is an exaggeration, isn't it?
Oh, not at all. From the very discerning minds, it obviously is a truism, a reflection of what has happened over a certain period since this current administration took over the reins of governance. We've heard of how some vigilante groups associated with the current regime, forcefully took over toll booths, a number of institutions, NHIA officers, etc., how people were manhandled, and which was bad enough. That obviously created fear and panic among the worker population of our society. Hitherto, this never existed, because the Ghanaian worker worked in some atmosphere of freedom, and which thought that it is a subtle and gruesome style of limiting the liberties that the workers of Ghana hold dear. I would think that these things should not taint our democracy, which has become so glowing and has been actually applauded the world over. And if we haven't these happenings, it obviously is worrying. It's a threat not only to the workforce of Ghana, it is a threat to the very survival of our society, because the workforce or the workers of Ghana obviously are the drivers of our economy. And if these people are so intimidated that they are unable, as it were, to come out freely, to express themselves in their way and style of working, then apparently we are going to suffer.
All right, Mr. Kwashiga, I appreciate all the examples you raised about toll booths and even with some government policies and schemes like the national school feeding program and all that. But many of these takeovers happened within the political arena. So, for example, well, their argument is politically inspired jobs like the toll booths. The argument is that the NDC will put their boys there, school feeding, they'll take their supporters there. That's not to justify their actions, but to say that the entire workforce is in fear and panic as a result of something that happened within a sector of that major workforce. You say it's not an exaggeration? Not
at all. And again, obviously, you will be limiting it so much if you just make references to toll booths, takeovers, and etc. We national health insurance officers, you cannot say are politically manipulated establishments. If you talk about youth employment, you cannot make reference to it as being politically engineered entities and etc. I mean, it just go around the nook and cranny of this country, and you hear these things replicate themselves, and it's so worrying to the point that several of these are not even being reported. Okay, workers have become so fearful, so scared of their own shadows that there are some of them when, as a result of the intimidation and the fear that is being spread, they can't come out to even complain about some manhandling and mistreatment that they are experiencing.
Okay, so as a minority, you think that you're the voice of these people by claiming that this has created some sort of fear and panic within the workforce?
Absolutely, it does. Okay. I mean, other than that, we don't even have international entities, commenting and expressing concern over the happenings in this country the last 3 to 4 months.
All right. Now, in your release as well, you use some very strong language. And you say that as a democratic society, we continue to witness, unfortunately, obscene mass worker transfers, forced resignations, politically motivated proceed-on-leave directives, and unlawful termination of engagement with public and civil service. I'm sure you mean workers. Within the public and civil service under President Nana Akufo-Addo's leadership. We know of the proceed-on-leave directives, but obscene mass worker transfers and unlawful termination of engagement. Do you have an example of an unlawful termination?
Yeah, of course. Unlawful termination. There are people who have just lost their jobs.
An example?
Well,
something we can readily associate, because if you're making this allegation, then I'm sure you should have a name or names.
Yeah, but again, will it be proper to start mentioning individuals' names without even their consent on national television?
No, but
but these things are happening, and I humbly would challenge you to go out there, do your investigation as a journalist, and you would really unearth these things that we're talking about. But even one example of a kind of resignation, which in itself was the individual was compelled. That I can talk about is the governor of the Bank of Ghana.
Well, he said he was resigning on personal basis.
Yeah, well, we give him that. We grant him that. But then the fact is that he's been diplomatic.
How was he forced? How was he forced? If you claim he was forced, I mean, just how
was compelled to? He was compelled to resign.
How?
Well, my dear, I don't think these are matters that one can, go into the nitty-gritties of on air. But the fact is that...
Because, you see, it's sometimes, even for us, a lot of people make these assumptions. The fact that
Can I give you another example, if you don't mind?
No, the fact that he was appointed in the previous government and this government comes and he resigns is likely it could be political. Maybe he just thinks that he doesn't want to work with this government. Could that be forced?
Well, I wouldn't debate you on that. But you see, there's something interesting happening in Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority. The Director General, obviously, is politically appointed. But then the directors of ports, like the Tema ports and the Takoradi ports, those are based on merits and then haven't gone through the mill. And there's a PNDC law that actually determine how these people end up in those offices. But recently, there was a move, a letter being circulated in GPHA without it going through the appropriate channel, that somebody has been given the job of the director of Tema Port, and the person physically reported, making certain demands.
Of this government was a fault of some administrative structures that were not put in place.
I mean, that was a letter signed by the president himself.
All right, okay, let's
bearing the signature of the president.
We don't have a lot of time. Let's quickly move on. Now, you make an interesting comparison. A year ago, and you mentioned that at that time he was then opposition leader, President Akufo-Addo. He said at that time, 1st May 2016, that within a short space of time, the Ghanaian worker will experience improved wages, reduced cost of living, increased job opportunities with a value addition in industrialization to create jobs with good pay across Ghana, while maintaining a safe and peaceful work environment necessary for the progressive programs and policies that the MPP have for the people of Ghana. Now, you posed a question, and that question is that, can the Ghanaian worker feel the signs of realizing these promises made by President Akufo-Addo a year ago in the midst of rising cost of living, increase in transport fares by 15%, high cost of utility bills, non-improvement in electricity power supply, and stagnating worker wages and salaries? First, a lot of people will argue with you on the fact that cost of living is rising. Two, the increase in transport fares by 15%. Ironically, this government has been reducing fuel prices.
Yeah, but we have an increase in transport
That's
fares.
why I'm saying it's an irony that the fuel prices are going down, but the transport fares went up by 15%. The government tells us that the GPRTU and other driver unions wanted to increase by 30%, but they managed to agree to a 15% rate. Even that, the drivers suggest that it's as a result of certain increases that happened during your government, which they were not able to implement
I don't know.
And that is what has caused this increase. Beside that, the high cost of utility bills, I don't know where that is coming from, because we know that there have been some tax reductions and non-improvement in electricity power supply. That also, we've been speaking to people. Yes, it's not totally gone, but it's not as bad as it used to be. In certain areas, it's getting worse. In others, it's getting better. So with all these, someone would just think it's just a deliberate attempt to raise red flags when there are no red flags.
No, not at all. The fact that you even indicated that in some areas it's getting worse, it's a pointer to the fact that indeed things are not the way the Ghanaian workers expected. Because last year, exactly today, what Anado said, you know, is very much at variance with what is being experienced today. The fact that some, you claim, some transport owners or drivers have told you that the reason for the rise in costs was a deferred increases that were to be made. It's neither here nor there. Here we are today. Now is our Ebenezer. This is where we are. And Nana Akufo-Addo is a man in the seat as president who is supposed to actually ensure that things work favorably for the Ghanaian people and for the Ghanaian workers. So that if under his guise there is an increase in transport fares, irrespective of whatever action is taken, it means that there is some malaise in the system that ought to be corrected, that ought to be dealt with, and these things are putting enormous pressure on the Ghanaian worker whose salaries are stagnating, whose salaries have not seen a rise, and yet they are expected to dole out more money to meet certain demands, such as transport fares and growing increases in what do you call it, food, and etc. You know, so the challenges abound. Again, we must also consider the fact that their children are going to school. If the child is not going to be, again, that is where you got it wrong.
All right, Mr. Kwasi, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but briefly before I let you go, I just want to pick your reaction on something interesting. Last year's May Day, we saw a lot of workers clad in red armbands, but we didn't see that this time around. What's your impression about that?
Well, of course, I'm sure that those who would have clad themselves in red handbands and etc., many of them decided to stay out. I mean, of course, you would agree with me that those who are the independent square are not the total workforce, even within the public sector, that appear there. We are aware that over 3,000 or more Ghanaian teachers have refused. Graduate teachers have refused to be at the May Day in defiance of what is happening to them, the excruciating pain that this administration is taking them through. So if you don't see the red armbands, it only means that the people who would have been in the red armbands, many of them are even scared as to what the vigilante groups like provide the names, Delta Force, Invisible Forces, and etc., could do to them should they even appear there, you know, in defiance.
But that's only an assumption.
It's not an assumption, because that is why 3,000 of them will even announce publicly that we will not be there. Many of them obviously fear for their lives. You know, they don't want to be beaten to pulp, and so they will not even show up at all. You know, this is the kind of situation we have on hand as a nation. We are saying that there is fear and panic, and we are saying that Nana Akufo-Addo must rise to the occasion to ensure that he handles Ghana and guide us on the path that he found it. That is that freedom, that tranquility, that peace within the workforce that existed before he took over the government.
All right, thank you very much for your time. Mr. Richard Kwasi, guys, MP for Keta and Deputy Ranking Member on Employment, Labour Relations and State Enterprises. And we've been talking workers today. They've released a statement. We'll post it on our Facebook page so you can have a full view of that particular letter signed by the Minority Leader, Honorable Haruna Idrisu. You're watching Joy News today.